Joining me now on the phone is former President Jimmy Carter. Mr. President, thanks for joining us. What are you going to miss most about this great man?
Well, I've had a long period of years as a very close friend of Nelson Mandela. I knew him the first time he ever left South Africa. He visited Addis Ababa for a meeting of the countries in Africa, and I happened to be there and met him and his wife then, Winnie. And since then, he's helped me with many projects that the Carter Center carries on. And about 6 years ago, Nelson and others formed a group called the Elders, of which I'm still a member, and so is his wife, Graça Machel. And so Nelson Mandela has been kind of an inspiration to us as we put together this group of former leaders in the world that no longer hold office. And I think the last public meeting he had was with the other members of the Elders along with him. So Nelson has meant a lot to me, obviously, when we were still in prison as an inspiration of a courageous and embattled and abused person who didn't want to fight back and continue with violence. He's just a very close personal friend whom I've known for many events. He used to come over here and go with me to give an annual Human Rights Award. And by the way, I remember that the first time I met Nelson, as I mentioned, in Addis Ababa, the first thing he did was congratulate me on my daughter, Amy, who had been arrested 3 times in college for demonstrating against apartheid in South Africa. So we got off to a good start, and we maintained a friendship right up until the end of his life.
He was obviously a very controversial figure, considered a terrorist by the U.S. government in the past, labeled one because of waging armed resistance against the apartheid government. Some called him a communist. He has praised people who are probably in many ways not deserving of praise, such as Fidel Castro. How do you reconcile the things that are not so great from his past with the unbelievable icon and the man he became?
Well, I think that the things for which he was abused didn't show that he was not great, because I think 3 years ago, as a matter of fact, he was still on the terrorist list by the United States, and they only removed him two Junes ago. So that doesn't prove that there's anything wrong with him. It's just a matter of the United States making a mistake in declaring him and all the members of the African National Congress as terrorists. And the United States does the same thing with other people around the world still. But anyway, I don't know of anything that would be derogatory that you could say about Nelson Mandela, although he did some very controversial things. As you may know, I tried every way I could when I was president to get an end to apartheid, but then when President Reagan came into office, he really undid the things that we did and tried to preserve the apartheid government. So the United States government policies have changed back and forth, and other nations have looked upon Nelson Mandela and his organization in different capacities. But I think what he's done has been right in wanting freedom. And then after he was finally released from 27 years of imprisonment, his attitude was one of forgiveness and reconciliation and building a better nation for his people.
That's the thing about him that I find the most fascinating, is his ability to forgive, having his jailers at his inauguration, insisting that the staff at the Capitol did not change, even though many of them had been part of an apartheid, oppressive, racist system. Having known him, where did that strength come from? I think a lot of us are not willing to forgive people for far, far less. How was he able to do that?
You know, I don't know. I didn't know him before he went into prison. Obviously, that was before my time in politics or government. But I presume that all the time he was in prison, his attitude then even was to resolve differences with the apartheid oppressors in a peaceful way and not by resorting to violence or revolution or armed resistance. So it may be that this was a part of his character from the very beginning, with which I'm not familiar. But there's no doubt that ever since he's been in the public eye, he's been almost absolutely undeviating in his ability to forgive people who had hurt him personally and hurt his people that he loved. And that was a Nelson Mandela that I knew all the many, many times that I have been with him. And so I'm very grateful for that. I remember once, by the way, when I went to visit Nelson in his home, my grandson, whose name is Jason Carter, was in the Peace Corps in South Africa. And Jason heard that I was going to meet Nelson Mandela. So Jason called me on the phone, and he calls me Papa. He said, Papa, let me go with you to meet Nelson Mandela because I always wanted to meet someone who went to prison before they were in public office. So because of that humorous remark, I took Jason to meet with me. And at the time, when I had about half an hour's worth of really important things I wanted to discuss with Nelson Mandela. And since Jason spoke Zulu fluently, and that was Nelson Mandela's local language, home language, they spent their half an hour talking to each other in Zulu and pretty well ignored me, the former president of the United States. So we've had some good times with Nelson, and also, obviously, recently, some sad times as he went into isolation and suffered so long. His wife, by the way, is one of our heroes. She's also a member of the Elders, and she's been very active. She's a hero for women and women's rights around the world, and she's now working on the next Millennium Goals for the United Nations to be put into effect after the year 2015.
Former President Jimmy Carter, thank you so much for the generosity for your time and for talking to us today.
I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.